Welcome to the Rural Missions Podcast. We exist to enable rural churches in God's mission. So join us now as we hear stories of hope from across the UK. Welcome to the Rural Missions Podcast. My name is Bob Goody and I am the Chief Exec for Rural Missions. You are joining us on our very first Rural Missions Podcast. We hope to be releasing series after series after series, looking at stories of hope from across rural areas. Now, because this is the first one, I thought it'd be good to sort of lay the scene, tell you a little bit about who Rural Missions are and what we do and how we might be able to support rural churches more. But rather than just hearing my dulcet tones for the next 20 minutes or so, I am joined by a very special guest in Beck Goody, my wife. Hello, Beck.
Ooh, hello, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this first podcast. Rather than me just answering my own questions, you are going to be sort of firing a few things at me, and hopefully we'll have a nice little chat. We often have good conversations, so I'm hoping this will be no different. But for the people that are listening in their car, at home, at the gym, wherever you might be, tell us, Beck, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? That kind of thing.
I'm Beck. I live with you. I live in Sutton in Ashfield with our little boy Reuben, who is 3 years old. I have the privilege of working for my church as pastoral coordinator, which I love. And for fun, I love going for walks with people and coffee and good food and going on holiday.
I think that's why we're a good match. I am a big fan of good coffee and good food. And you've got me into holidays, so that's a good start. And obviously you're working for church, and together we volunteer at church as part of the leadership core team as well. So deeply invested in local church. What for you is one of the highlights of working for the church?
Oh, I guess getting to see what God is up to in people's lives and seeing people set free and experience that freedom is such a privilege, and it's amazing to be a part of.
That's a good answer. I've not even pre-prepped you for that.
I know, look at that.
So this podcast is going to be about that, like exploring, having good conversations and all those kind of things. We hope you enjoy this. We hope you like and subscribe to our channel. We're going to be releasing these every couple of weeks, and we've got some incredible guests in this first season. We've got Dr. Pete Atkins, who is a fresh expressions pioneer and established a church over in Lincoln, and they're meeting in community. He intentionally moved to live rurally because that's where God had called his heart and his family to. We're going to have Barry Osborne, who is the founder for Rural Missions. We've got Rachel Heffer, who works for the Evangelical Alliance. A few woos going on. I'm
I don't
hoping
know if I'm allowed to do that or not.
Well, you are
anyway.
doing, so that's all good. Hopefully you woo at home as well. So Beck, you've got a few questions that are going to help us.
Yeah, it'd be great to get to know you a bit better. So, Bob, what is this podcast about? What is it all about?
So if you've joined us, you will have heard the little intro sting that our good friend Dave Plum at 300 Acre Studios made for us. Now, we wanted to be able to create a resource that is going to be available free of charge, that is going to help people inspire, challenge, refresh us. And basically what I'm going to do is go round with a couple of microphones and a little piece of recording equipment and get out into rural areas, meeting people that are ordained, people that are in lay ministry, people that are serving their communities in any way, shape or form, and going, what are the stories of hope that are happening in your area? What are the things that are going to potentially stir something fresh across this country? So that's why we've set this up just as a little sounding board and a little aid for when people are out and about on the road thinking, what do I listen to today? Do I listen to worship music? Do I listen to the radio? Or do we put on the Rural Missions podcast and hear stories of hope from across the UK? So that is what we're going to do across this season and ongoing, is going, what is God up to? How can we hear those stories? And then how can we join in with what God is up to? because these stories are not just for little communities where they are. God wants to move across our nation. And so maybe this is going to be the flame that lights the touch paper that suddenly sparks something new in your own communities as you go, I could do that.
That's so encouraging. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's really exciting to see what God's going to be stirring up. And so, Bob, can you tell us, for those that are listening, who are you? And tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm Bob Goody. I'm married to Beck Goody, who is our co-host today. Born and bred in Mansfield, live with Beck and our little boy Reuben, part of the leadership core team at our church. Now, my background is very much in mission. Like, I was from a non-Christian background, went through quite a difficult time across my teens, and was about as far away from God as I could possibly have imagined. And then all of a sudden, God started to intervene. I met a Christian for the first time in a Christian-run youth centre, and within 3 weeks, I'd come to understand what it meant when people said Jesus died for you, when people started to explain the gospel message. And actually, the first time I heard the gospel message coherently, it only took them a minute or so, but that day I came to know Jesus for myself because it made sense. Everything clicked into place, and I was set free from a whole load of hassle and addictions and things in my past that were holding me back. And all of a sudden I knew this God that loved me. And so I went to the youth worker that had took me to this big festival where I'd heard the gospel preached and came to know Jesus, and said, I don't want people to have to go through what I did without knowing what I now know. So I got back from a field in Somerset, arrived back in Mansfield, and started working full-time in ministry, looking to do mission. So primarily around young people and children, and across the last 23 years, that's what I've done. That's what my life's purpose has been about, is primarily helping equip others to share their faith more clearly and with their community. So worked alongside and for Youth for Christ, Scripture Union, Spring Harvest, a lot of the names that people will know and recognise. But every step of the way, it's always been, how do I help facilitate mission? And so when I saw this role here at Rural Missions, I thought, yes, what a privilege that would be to get out and enable rural churches in God's mission. So that's a little bit about who I am. I now lead the organisation. I'm 4.5 months in as this podcast is released, and love it and couldn't think of anything better to do.
Oh, that's so exciting. What a journey. Wow, thank you. And so Rural Missions, what is its history? Like, what are you guys about?
So Rural Missions, we were founded 36 years ago by the Reverend Barry Osborne. Now, he'd spent 30 plus years already engaged in mission, loves Jesus, loves rural communities, and his real heart and desire was to see credible Christian communities in every village across this nation. So Rural Missions, as was then, it's been through a few names: Rural Sunrise, Rural Mission Solutions, and today we now stand as Rural Missions, because we're not there to provide all the solutions anymore. We're there to journey alongside the local church, to go, what has God already gifted you with, and how could you use that to engage your community? We're not calling everyone to be extreme evangelists and to get out on the streets preaching. Some people that might be the calling, but actually what might it look like to become slightly more missional, to take things that we're already doing and go, how could I engage my friends, family and community with that? So Rural Missions, we have a three-stranded approach that we engage churches with.
A three-stranded approach. So can you tell us, like, what is the first strand?
So I certainly can. It's almost like I'd written these questions to help us. Now, this is the first one that's actually on the list I gave you, so we're into that mode now. So the first one is that we run a tailor-made consultation. So we recognise that every church is different, every community is different. There is not a one-size-fits-all that we can just give you this one-page document and that's going to inspire you, equip you, and release you into mission more than ever before. If there was, I would certainly be licensing that out, and
Great.
for £1,000 you could have this document. But we recognise everyone is different. God has gifted us all uniquely. We have different spiritual gifts that are in operation in our churches. So what we look to do is to go and journey with a church or a benefice or a cluster of churches, whatever it may be, but try and gather those that are already working alongside one another, and to go, let's spend the day. We come in, we facilitate this tailor-made day, exploring, just as I said earlier, what has God gifted you with? What are the needs in your community? And then ultimately, what 3 things are you going to put into place to start to action some of these things, to bring them together? Recently, we had an online forum, and a pastor called Jim came and shared with us. And he said he walked into his church, this new church that he was going to be the pastor of, and he said, what are we going to do to be more missional? And they looked at him and they went, oh, no idea. We've not got time. We've not got capacity. We don't want to do more stuff. So he flipped it on its head a little bit, and he said, what do you enjoy doing? They quickly came up with the solutions, and they were like, well, we like baking cakes. We like coffee time together. We like to read books and discuss together. And he said, well, you know the things that you love doing. Who could you invite into those things? And all of a sudden, this church is starting to see growth and momentum across the community as they go from having some cake amongst themselves to having cake and coffee in church, reading a good book and going to their neighbour, do you want to come to our book club? Do you want to come to our coffee drop-in? Do you want to come and eat cake with me? Like, how many people are going to turn down if you say, will you come and eat cake with me? So we sort of take that process and we go, what have you got? What are the needs? And how can you start to bring those 2 things together? So it's a refined process. We have a guy called David who oversees this for us, who's one of our mission enablers. And so if that process sounds like it would be useful for you, we come free of charge. We don't charge for our time or our services. We just love to come, support your church and go, how can we be more missional? How could you start to take the things that you're good at and use them to meet the needs of your community?
I love that. What a brilliant way to flip it round and just see what we're doing already and how can we join in with that. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And what about, so you said there's 3 strands. What's strand number 2?
Strand number 2. So we have missional network hubs. So if you've been journeying with Rural Missions for a little while, you might have seen that we've had an advert up for a missional network lead. Because one of the things that we recognise is that living rurally can be quite isolating. And if you're trying to do mission in your church, and if there's 8 or 9 of you that are in this church, you love Jesus, you want to see your community reached, it can get tiring, it can get a bit lonely. You need someone that you can bounce ideas off and just sit and engage with and pray with. So we're creating missional network hubs across the country, drawing together churches from, let's say, a 15 to 20 mile radius and going, who are the people that would benefit? Is it those that are called to be our ministers, our ordained leaders? Is it those who are lay leaders within the church? Or is it the expression I've heard recently, is it the lay, which is basically the term for if you're just in church, like you are a Christian, loves Jesus, you go to church, you don't have a specific call or remit within that space, you're not one of the leaders, but actually you want to share Jesus. How do we bring people like that all together into one space for coffee, for cake, and to go, what's inspiring you at the minute? What's working well in your community? What's God up to? What are the challenges that you're facing? Where do you need God to intervene in these moments? And so we're just wanting to create intentional spaces for people to do that, to be able to gather every other month just to go, we're in this together. We're Christians. Doesn't matter what denomination we are or what network we're part of. We all love Jesus. We all love our communities, but we just need a bit of support and TLC at times. So we have our missional network hubs, and we also facilitate some of those online through our online forum, where we gather every few months and we have a guest speaker come. Our next one is Mark Greenwood, who is the Director of Evangelism for Elim, and he's going to share what does it mean to have an invitational culture in our church. A few years ago, I did a bit of a survey around a whole host of churches when I was working for Scripture Union, and I met them after Christmas, and I said, what were attendance figures like? Who came? And people were like, oh, it was like revival, like the church was packed out, more people than we ever normally have. And then I just asked the follow-up question, what did you invite them to? And sadly, most of those churches said, well, we wish them a happy Christmas and hope you have a lovely time, on the expectation that we might see them at Easter, and if not, we'll see them next Christmas. But actually, some of those churches said, well, we took that opportunity and we run an alpha course in January. We set up a toddler group in January. We set up a youth group in January. Like, what are the things that we're going to invite people to? All of a sudden, we're getting these connections, and we want people to go on a clear journey through their spirituality, coming to meet Jesus for themselves. But if we just leave them at the door every time and go, oh, sorry, that event's done now, we'll let you know when there might be one in the future, that's not going to quite cut the mustard. So that's what our online forum is. Next time, we're looking at what does it mean to be invitational. Again, that's free. It's on Zoom. Come along, gain some insight. We have some breakout rooms where we then split off and people can share their own context, like what stood out for them in the talk, but what's challenging in their own context that they might just want to talk with 6 people that are in similar worlds and to pray with one another. So yeah, we have our networks, our sort of training side of stuff and sort of equipping. So that's our second strand.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's really encouraging. Yeah. And what about strand number 3?
So strand number 3 are resources. So we recognise that there are a multitude of resources out there that people can use and digest. One of those things is podcasts. So we've launched this podcast, of which this is the first. We have some top tips videos on our YouTube channel. We've got a whole host of content there, so feel free to check it out. We're Rural Missions UK if you go onto YouTube, or go to our website ruralmissions.org.uk. All the links are on there. But these top tips videos, they're 2 to 3 minutes long. There's 5 top tips on how to engage your community, 5 top tips on how to engage your local school, 5 top tips on how to engage children and families, and 5 top tips for how to engage young people in your community. Now, we're going to continue to build those 5 tips for engaging local farmers and in the agricultural world. And we recognise that whilst these resources, some people will use, and we're starting to see some good traction on those, we just want it to be a place where you can come and download, share amongst your team, help yourself. If they're useful, great. If they're not, please don't tell everyone they're not useful. Tell everyone they're good. But one of the things that we've got in the pipeline that we're releasing in September, I've been working with a guy called John Plum, who runs Southfields Farm. One of his biggest things on the farm is that he has school groups come regularly, or they take animals and go to the schools. But John's a Christian. His daughter, who works on the farm with him as well, is a Christian. And between them, they don't just have a nice little walk around a farm. They go, oh, look at this hay. Have you ever considered the straw that is growing and how God made this? And the miracle of animals and birth of animals when it's lambing season and all those kind of things. Everything has a pointer back to Jesus. So actually John is working alongside us, and we're creating 10 object lesson videos, and we're putting some assembly lesson packages with them and some all-age worship resources. So if you're thinking, what could I do on a Sunday morning, or what could I do for the primary school assembly? these videos will be a 3 to 4 minute on the farm with a farmer explaining the joy and the goodness of farming, but how God then relates into that as love, as creator, as sustainer, as salvation. So, as I said, that's being released in September 24. I suppose it depends what time you're listening to this. It might be 2027. Hello in the future. So yeah, resources. We're going to be creating some physical, digital resources, but check out our website. We want to be a go-to place to help, inspire, equip. And as our strapline says, we want to enable rural churches in God's mission. So if that's you, we'd love to work alongside you, help you, support you, pray for you, honour you, all those kind of things.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Bob. Yeah, it's really encouraging to hear what you guys are doing and so many different things that you're offering and helping to cultivate that intentional and invitational culture as well. That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
So that is who Rural Missions are. That's a little bit about us. So you've got the basis as the start of our podcast series. If we can help you by doing a tailor-made day, or even just coming and standing with you for a day, looking around your churches, we can write a little summary, bring a few bits of advice or thoughts, offer training and support. If the online forums or our mission networks would be a great space for you, then we'd love you to be in touch. And if you just want some free resources, some bookmarks of lots of organisations that can help and assist through small group material, through videos, through training, then all of it, I point you to our website, ruralmissions.org.uk. But Beck, thank you so much for your time and for sitting around our dinner table with our 2 microphones and a bit of equipment. But it's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you all for listening. And as I say, if we can be of any support, we'd love to journey with you and support you. So please do be in touch. But for now, that is the end of our very first Rural Missions podcast. Join us next time when Dr. Pete Atkins will be joining us. Thank you so much. God bless. To find out how we can support your church, head to ruralmissions.org.uk.